I want to start with the report that made me stop sleeping. It was filed on the night of February 19th, in my own handwriting, on the standard incident form we use at the station, Form 11B, the one with the carbon copy underneath, so the original goes to the regional office and the duplicate stays in the binder. I know my handwriting. I've been writing the same way since I was 9 years old. The little loop on my lowercase g, the way I cross my sevens because I trained myself to in college so they wouldn't look like ones. It was my handwriting, and it described a place that does not exist. The report said I had walked 400 meters northwest of the station during a wideout to recover a downed sensor array. It said I found a structure there. A long, low building, half buried in snow, with a door that opened inward and a corridor that went down. It described the corridor in detail. It said the walls were warm. It said I counted 41 doors before I turned back. It described the smell, like the inside of a mouth. It was signed and timed and dated. There is no structure 400 meters northwest of the station. There is nothing out there but flat tundra and ice for 30 kilometers. I have walked that ground in summer. It is empty. I do not remember writing that report. But I remember the corridor. I remember it the way you remember a dream that you're sure was real until someone proves it wasn't, except no one has been able to prove it wasn't, because the report exists, and the place doesn't, and both of those things are true at the same time, and I have spent the last 4 months living inside that contradiction. My name doesn't matter. Where I work doesn't matter, and I couldn't tell you exactly where it is anyway, because that turned out to be part of the problem. What matters is that I spent 11 months at a remote monitoring station above the Arctic Circle, and somewhere in those 11 months I started writing down places that aren't there. And the worst part, the part one keep coming back to at 3 in the morning when the heater clicks and I sit up in bed certain I can hear snow against the window that isn't there anymore. The worst part is that the reports keep being right. Let me start at the beginning. I'll try to keep it in order. Order is the only thing I have left that feels like it belongs to me. I took the job because it paid well and asked for almost nothing. I'd been out of work for 14 months. I had a degree in atmospheric science that had turned out to be worth less than the paper, a lease I couldn't afford, and a recently ended relationship that had taken most of the furniture and all of the cat. When the listing came through a contractor's mailing list, remote environmental monitoring technician, Northern Alaska, 11-month contract, room and board provided, isolation pay, I applied that same night without reading the whole thing. The interview was a phone call. One call, 20 minutes, a flat-voiced woman named Dolan who asked me 3 questions about equipment maintenance, and one question that I thought was strange at the time and think about constantly now. She asked, "How's your memory?" I laughed and said it was fine. She didn't laugh. She wrote something down, I could hear the pen, and said, "Good. We need people who can tell the difference between what they remember and what happened." I thought it was a weird way to phrase a normal thing. I told her I understood the importance of accurate logging. She said, "That's not what I asked." And then she offered me the job. The flight up was in stages. A commercial jet to Fairbanks, then a smaller plane, then a much smaller plane that I shared with crates of supplies and a pilot who didn't speak. The land below went from forest to scrub to white. By the last leg there was nothing down there at all. Just a flat, featureless plain of snow that the low sun turned the color of dishwater, going on past any horizon I could measure. The station was a cluster of low buildings connected by enclosed corridors, the way Antarctic bases are built, so you never have to go outside to move between them. From the air it looked like something dropped and forgotten. A few antenna masts. A radar dome. A landing strip scraped into the ice that the pilot put us down on without a word. There were 9 people stationed there when I arrived, not counting me. I'll introduce them as they come up. The first one I met was a man named Patrick, who'd been there 6 years and who met me at the strip with a snow machine and a spare parka. "You'll want to keep your face covered," he said. "First-timers always think they can handle it. Then they get a patch of frostbite on the cheek and learn." He looked at me for a second longer than felt natural. "You read the orientation packet?" I had. On the last plane. All of it? I think so. Read it again tonight, he said. The parts about the storms. Read those twice. The station ran on procedure. I want to be clear about that, because I think the procedure is the thing that kept me sane for as long as it did, and it's also, I now believe, the thing that was designed to keep me from noticing what I was actually doing there. Every day was the same. We worked in 12-hour shifts, 2 people per shift in the main control room, with overlap at the changeovers. The control room was the heart of the station, a long, low room full of monitors and radar repeaters and an old analog barometer that everyone trusted more than the digital ones for reasons no one could articulate. The lighting was fluorescent, the cheap kind that hums at a frequency you stop hearing after a week and start hearing again the moment something goes wrong. My job, on paper, was atmospheric monitoring. I logged temperatures, pressures, wind speeds. I tracked storm systems as they formed and moved across the radar. I maintained the sensor arrays scattered across the surrounding tundra, which meant suiting up and going out to clear ice from instruments, and replace batteries and receipt connections that the cold worked loose. I relayed reports to the regional office twice a day, at 0600 and 1800, on a schedule so rigid that being 4 minutes late got you a note in your file. The reports were the strange part, though I didn't understand how strange until much later. We logged everything. Every reading, every observation, every change in conditions. The binders in the records room went back 40 years, each one full of carbon-copied forms in dozens of different hands. We were, I was told, one of the longest continuously operating monitoring stations in the Arctic. The data we collected went into climate models, storm prediction systems, aviation safety. Important work. Quiet work. The kind of work that nobody thinks about and everybody depends on. But some storms didn't get logged. I noticed it in my second week, though I didn't understand it as a pattern yet. I was watching a system develop on the radar. A tight, fast-rotating low coming in from the northeast, the kind of thing I'd been trained to flag immediately. I called it out to Renner, the woman sharing my shift, a small, careful person who'd been at the station 3 years and who I'd already learned to like. Got a system building, northeast quadrant, I said. Pressure's dropping fast. You want me to start a track on it? Renner looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked at the barometer. Then she said, "No. Leave that one." "Leave it? It's not ours," she said. I didn't know what that meant. I asked. She said, "It'll move off. Some of them aren't ours to log." And then she changed the subject so smoothly and so completely that I let it go, the way you let go of a thing a coworker says when you're new and don't want to seem difficult. The storm didn't move off. I watched it for the next 6 hours. It came in over the station, sat almost directly overhead for most of my shift, and the whole time, Renner didn't log a single reading from it. The forms for those hours have a little notation in the conditions column that I'd seen before and assumed meant no significant weather. It's a small symbol. A circle with a line through it. I asked Patrick about it later casually, like I was just curious about the shorthand. "That's a null," he said. "Means there's nothing to report. There was a whole system over us for 6 hours." He didn't look up from what he was doing. "There was nothing to report," he said again, in exactly the same tone, and something in the way he said it the second time made me not ask a third. I want to describe the cold, because the cold is part of all of this, and I can't make you understand the rest without it. It wasn't just temperature, though the temperature was brutal. 40 below was a mild day, 60 below not unusual. The cold was a presence. It got into the buildings despite the heating, pulled in the corners of rooms, breathed off the windows. You could feel it waiting on the other side of every wall. When you went outside, even properly suited, it found you. It pressed on your eyes. It made the inside of your nose freeze with the first breath. The snow didn't crunch, it squeaked, a high, dry sound, because it was too cold to be anything but powder. And the silence. People talk about silence like it's the absence of sound, but Arctic silence is its own thing, a thick, total quiet that the snow swallows everything into. On a still day you could hear your own blood. You could hear the fluorescent lights from across the building. You could hear, sometimes, a distant low sound that the others said was the ice shifting, or the wind in the antenna masts, or the generators. A sound like something very large breathing very slowly, a long way off. I asked about that sound too in my first month. Ice, said Patrick. Generators, said Renner. Don't go looking for the source of it, said a third man, Vas, who almost never spoke, and who said this without me having asked him anything at all. By my third month I had stopped being new, and that's when I started to see. The first thing I noticed was the gaps in the records. I'd been assigned to digitize old logs, a make-work project, the kind they give you to fill the dead hours, and it meant going through the binders page by page. And the deeper I went, the more nulls I found. That circle with a line through it. Pages and pages of normal readings, careful and complete, and then a day, or 2 days, or a week, where the conditions column just said null, 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 and nothing else, even though the temperature and pressure logs around those gaps told a clear story of major storms moving through. The nulls weren't random. I started keeping my own private record, just a little notebook I kept in my bunk, where I wrote down the dates of the nulls. And a pattern came out of it that I still can't explain. They came roughly every 40 days. Not exactly. The interval drifted. But across 40 years of records, the nulls clustered in a slow rhythm, like a tide. And every null lasted between 1 and 4 days. And during every single null, the barometric pressure did something I had never seen weather do. It dropped, and then it stopped. It would fall the way pressure falls before a storm, lower and lower, and then it would simply hold, flat, stable, at a pressure low enough that we should have been in the middle of the worst storm in the station's history. And it would hold there for the full duration of the null, sometimes for days, before climbing slowly back to normal. Pressure doesn't do that. Pressure isn't a thing that decides to stay somewhere. It's just the weight of air. For it to hold at a fixed low value for 3 days, something would have to be holding it there. I checked the barometer against the digital sensors during the next null, which came about a week after I noticed the pattern. They agreed. The pressure was low, and flat, and steady, and the old analog needle sat there unmoving while outside the window the snow came down so thick I couldn't see the antenna mast 40 feet away. I logged it. I wrote it all down on the form, the real readings, the way I'd been trained to. The next morning the form was gone from the binder. In its place was a new form, in my handwriting, for the same time period, with the conditions column reading null. I want to be very precise about this, because this is the first time it happened and I've gone over it 1,000 times. The replacement form was in my handwriting. The little loop on the G. The cross sevens. Everything. But I did not write it. I had written the real readings. I remembered writing them. And now there was a different form in its place, written by me, that I had no memory of writing. I asked Renner if she'd swapped the form. She looked at me with an expression I'd come to recognize over the following months, a kind of careful blankness, the face of someone deciding how much truth a question can survive. "You logged it null," she said. "Don't you remember?" I logged the readings. The pressure hold. I wrote it all down. "You logged it null," she said again, gently, and put her hand on my arm. "It's a hard adjustment, the first few months. The light does things. The hours. Everybody loses a little time at first. It's nothing to worry about." The radio changed around then, too. We had a scheduled communication window with the regional office twice a day, plus an open emergency channel that was supposed to be monitored at all times. The scheduled comms were normal, clipped, procedural, a voice reading our numbers back to us to confirm receipt. But the open channel started doing things. At first it was just bursts of static at odd hours, always during the long dark of the night shift. Then the static started to have a shape to it. A rhythm. It would rise and fall, in a slow pattern that, I'm sorry, I know how this sounds, that matched the breathing sound from outside. The same slow tempo. Static in, static out. As if the channel were carrying the breath of something too far away to see. And once, on a night in my 4th month, The static resolved for about 3 seconds into a voice. It was reading numbers. Coordinates, I thought, or readings. The voice was flat and tired and very familiar, and it took me until the static swallowed it again to understand why it was familiar. It was my voice. Reading coordinates I didn't recognize, in a tone I'd never used, calm and exhausted, like someone who had been doing this for a very long time. I told Voss about it the next morning, because Voss was the only one who I thought might tell me something true. He was older than the rest of us, and quieter, and there was a quality to his silence that felt less like avoidance, and more like the silence of a man who had decided long ago that talking didn't help. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "The channel picks things up. From before. From after. The signal doesn't always come in order out here." He looked at his hands. "If you hear yourself on it, don't answer. Whatever you do, don't answer back." "Why not?" "Because then you've talked to it," he said. "And it remembers the people who talk to it." He wouldn't say anything else. The safety procedures during storms had always struck me as excessive, but in my 4th and 5th months I started to understand that they weren't about safety. Not the kind of safety I'd assumed. When a null was approaching, and the experienced staff could feel them coming, could read the slow, flat drop in the pressure days out, the station went into a routine that wasn't in any orientation packet. We sealed the outer corridors. We covered the windows with insulated blackout panels, which I'd been told was to conserve heat, but which I came to understand was so that we couldn't see out. We were forbidden from going outside during a null, for any reason. And we ran the radio on a loop, a recording, the same recording, played continuously on the open channel, of a man's voice reading a sequence of numbers over and over. I asked what the numbers were. "Coordinates," said Patrick. "Of what?" "Of here," he said. "We tell it where we are. So it doesn't have to come looking." I thought he was joking. I'm fairly sure now that he wasn't. The memory problems got worse through the winter. I'd find notes in my own handwriting that I didn't remember writing. I'd find tools moved, tasks completed that I had no memory of doing. Once I found my outdoor gear soaking wet and crusted with ice in the drying room, and I had no memory of going outside, and when I checked the log, there was an entry, in my hand, recording a 4-hour excursion to the northwest sensor array. During a null. During a time when going outside was forbidden. I asked Renner if I'd gone out. She got that careful blank look again and said, "You don't go out during a null. None of us do." And then, more quietly, almost to herself, "Where would you even go? There's nothing out there." But there was something out there. I was starting to write reports about it. The reports started in my 6th month, and they came during the nulls, and I never remembered writing any of them. They were search and rescue reports. That was the strangest part at first, because we weren't a search and rescue station. We were a monitoring station. There was nobody out there to rescue. The nearest human being was 400 kilometers away. But the forms I found in my handwriting were SR forms, Form 22A, a form I'd never even seen blank, a form that wasn't in any of our binders, that I couldn't have filled out from memory because I didn't know it existed. And they described places. The first one described a valley. There are no valleys near the station. It's flat tundra in every direction for 30 kilometers. But the report described a valley northwest of the station, a long, shallow depression in the ice, and at the bottom of it, structures. It described them in the cold procedural language of a real SAR report. Subject located approximately 2.3 kilometers from station, NW heading. Structures present, origin unknown, EST-11 buildings, low profile, partially subsurface. Subject non-responsive. Recovery not attempted due to conditions. Recommend no further excursion. Subject. There was a subject. The report didn't say who. It said the subject was non-responsive and recovery not attempted, and it recommended that nobody go out there again. I had written it. I didn't remember writing it. There was no valley. There were no buildings. There was no subject. I took it to Dolan. I should explain about Dolan. The flat-voiced woman from my phone interview was the station director, and she lived at the station, but I almost never saw her. She kept to the administrative wing, which was off the main corridor behind a door that was always locked, and she communicated mostly through notes and through the schedule. In 6 months I'd spoken to her maybe 4 times. She was a small, gray woman with the effect of someone who had stopped being afraid of anything a long time ago, and not because the fear had gone away. I knocked on her door with the report in my hand. She let me in. Her office was warm, warmer than anywhere else on the station, and the walls were covered in maps, old maps, hand-annotated, with marks I didn't understand. I put the report on her desk. "I found this in my handwriting," I said. "I don't remember writing it. It describes a place that doesn't exist. There's no valley out there. There are no buildings. And it says there was a subject." She read it slowly. Her face didn't change. "What's your memory been like lately?" she asked. It was the same question from the interview, and the way she asked it told me she remembered asking it before. "Bad," I said. "It's been bad. I'm losing time. I think there's something wrong with me." "There's nothing wrong with you," she said, and for a moment she sounded almost kind. "Your memory is working exactly the way it's supposed to. It's protecting you." She set the report down. "The reports aren't a symptom. They're the job. You've just started doing the part of the job we don't put in the orientation packet." "What's the job?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and went to one of the maps on the wall, an old one, and she put her finger on a spot northwest of the station, on what should have been empty tundra. There was a mark there. A small, careful annotation in faded ink. 40 years, she said. 40 years of people sitting in that control room, writing down what the storms tell them. We don't monitor the weather. We never have. We monitor the thing that lives in the weather. It tells us where it's been and where it's going. It tells us in the static, and in the pressure, and sometimes, when it wants something, it tells us through the reports. Through the people. It writes through you. It always picks one. This year it picked you. I told her she was insane. I told her I was leaving. I told her I'd walk to the airstrip and wait for the next supply plane, and I didn't care if it was 40 below. There hasn't been a supply plane in 3 weeks, she said. There won't be one until the nulls pass. They never fly during the season. And you can't walk anywhere, because there's nowhere to walk to, except northwest, and you've already been there, and you wrote down what you found. She sat back down. You're not a prisoner. None of us are. We stay because somebody has to, and because once you've heard it on the channel, it knows you, and the only safe place is the place where it already knows where you are. She folded her hands. Go back to work. The next one's coming. You can feel it, can't you? The pressure. I could. I'd been feeling it for 2 days and telling myself I wasn't. That slow flat drop. The needle on the old barometer sliding down and getting ready to stop. The next null was the worst one in the station's recorded history. I know, because I checked the records before the records changed. The pressure dropped lower than I'd ever seen it. Low enough that we all had headaches, that our ears popped, that the older staff moved slowly and carefully like people underwater. We sealed the corridors and covered the windows and started the recording on the open channel. The man's voice reading the coordinates, over and over, we are here, we are here, we are here. And then the equipment started to lie. The radar showed a storm that wasn't moving. It sat over the station, a tight spiral, and it didn't drift, didn't decay, just sat there rotating in place for hour after hour, which weather does not do. The thermometers disagreed with each other by 40 degrees. The clocks in different rooms showed different times, and the difference between them grew over the course of the null, as if time itself were pooling unevenly through the building like the cold. And the staff changed. They went flat. All of them. Renner, Patrick, Voss, the others I haven't named. During the null they became calm in a way that wasn't calm, emotionally absent, moving through their tasks with a smooth detachment. like people performing a ritual they'd performed so many times they'd worn the meaning out of it. They stopped making eye contact. They stopped using each other's names. When I spoke to them, they answered in single words, in flat voices. And once I caught Renner standing in the corridor facing the blacked-out window, perfectly still, her lips moving, and when I came close I heard she was reading coordinates. Quietly. To herself. The same coordinates the recording was reading. As if she'd become part of the transmission. The records room is where I found the rest of it. I went there during the null because I couldn't sleep and I couldn't stand the control room. And I started pulling binders at random, going further back than I ever had. And I found the other reports. The ones from before me. 40 years of search and rescue reports. One operator per season, every season, writing reports they didn't remember writing, describing the same place. The valley. The 11 structures. The corridor that went down. 40 years of different handwriting describing the exact same impossible geography in the exact same cold procedural language. And in every report, a subject. Non-responsive. Recovery not attempted. But it wasn't always the same subject. Because as I read back through the years, I started recognizing the subjects. The reports described them. Physical descriptions, the way a real SAR report would. And the subject in the report from 1994 matched the description of an operator whose name I'd seen in the staff logs from 1992. The subject in the 2003 report matched an operator from 2001. The subjects were the operators. The ones who came before. The reports weren't describing strangers found in the snow. They were describing the people who had written the reports the seasons before. Each operator, eventually, became the subject in the next operator's report. Found in the valley that doesn't exist. Non-responsive. Recovery not attempted. Recommend no further excursion. I went back to my own first report. The one about the corridor with 41 doors. I read it again. And I understood that I had counted the doors because I was looking for someone. The report didn't say it. But I knew, the way you know things in dreams, that I'd gone down that corridor looking for the operator who'd come before me, the one whose handwriting filled the binder from last season, the one I'd never met because he'd been rotated out before I arrived. I went to find his name in the staff log. The page was a null. A circle with a line through it. There was no operator before me. There never had been. But I remembered him. I remembered his handwriting. I remembered looking for him in a corridor that doesn't exist. I'm going to tell you what I think it is, but I want to be honest that I don't know, and that not knowing is the truest part of all of this. I don't think it's a creature. I never saw a creature. Nobody ever sees a creature. That's not how it works. I think it's something that lives in the difference between what happened and what gets recorded. I think it lives in the nulls, not in the storms, but in the spaces we leave blank when we refuse to write the storms down. I think 40 years ago somebody at that station discovered that if you record certain weather, the weather notices you. That writing a thing down is a kind of attention, and attention runs both ways. And there are things out in the long Arctic dark that have been starving for attention for longer than there have been people to give it. So they stopped recording it. They learned to leave it null. They learned that the thing in the storm would tolerate being unwatched. If they fed it instead, fed it coordinates on the open channel, we are here, a small offering of attention given on our terms instead of taken on its. And they learned that every so often it wanted more than coordinates. It wanted a person. It wanted someone to come out into the place that doesn't exist and become the subject of the next year's report. And it would take that person whether you gave them or not, so the kindest thing the station could do was make sure the person didn't remember going. That's what the memory loss is. That's what Dolan meant when she said my memory was protecting me. The forgetting isn't a malfunction. It's mercy. The station is built to make sure that when it's your turn to walk northwest into the valley and lie down and become non-responsive, you don't remember doing it, and you don't remember choosing it, and you come back, if you come back, with nothing in your head but a report in your own handwriting describing a place that isn't there. I think I went out during the worst null. I think I walked northwest. I think I found the valley and the 11 structures in the corridor that goes down. and I think I went down it, counting doors, looking for the man who came before me, and I think I found him behind one of them. I don't remember it, but the report exists. And the report says, subject located. Recovery not attempted. Subject identified as, and then my own name. The report says I found myself out there, non-responsive, and recommended no further excursion. I came back. Most of us come back. Coming back is part of it. You come back wrong, and emptied out, and flat, and you take your place at the radar and you read coordinates into the dark, and you wait for the season when it's your handwriting in the binder and someone newer than you walks out into the valley to find your name in the report. The null lasted 4 days. On the 4th day the pressure began, very slowly, to climb. I remember the others coming back too. Renner's eyes focusing again. Petrick using my name. The smooth detachment draining out of them, replaced by the ordinary tiredness of people who'd survived another season. Nobody talked about it. Nobody ever talks about it. That's the institutional silence. It isn't a conspiracy, it's grief. It's the particular flat quiet of people who have agreed without ever discussing it that the only way to keep living is to not say the thing out loud. Renner found me in the records room, surrounded by the binders, and she didn't ask what I'd read. She just sat down next to me on the floor, and after a while she said, "You went out, didn't you? During the null?" "I think so. I don't remember." "You won't," she said. "That's the good part. That's the only good part." And then she said the only thing anyone at that station ever said to me that felt like the whole truth. "I went out 3 years ago. My 2nd season. I don't remember it either. But sometimes I dream about a corridor, and there are doors, and I'm looking for someone, and I never find them, and I wake up so relieved I cry, because I think the someone I'm looking for is me, and I think the fact that I never find them is the only reason I'm still here." The season ended. The nulls stopped. The supply plane came. My contract was up, and I left. They let me leave. Nobody stops you. That's the thing I keep trying to explain to people who ask why I didn't run sooner, why any of us stayed. There's no fence, there's no lock, there's nothing keeping you there but the slow understanding that it already knows your name, and that the station is the one place in the world where it knows exactly where to find you, which means it's the one place it doesn't have to come looking. Out here, away from the station, I'm not so sure it knows where I am anymore. I think about that a lot. I took the binder page with me. My first report. The corridor, the 41 doors. I have it in a drawer. I take it out sometimes to remind myself it's real, because the memory of the corridor has gotten stronger since I left, not weaker, and I worry that one day the memory and the report will be all I have, and I won't be able to tell anymore which came first. The other reports, the ones in the records room, 40 years of them, those I left behind. I think about them constantly. I think about how each operator becomes the subject of the next one's report. And I've done the math more times than I want to admit. And here is the thing I can't stop thinking about, the thing that wakes me at 3 in the morning. If every operator becomes the subject of the next year's report, then somewhere up there right now, this season, there is a new operator. Someone who took the job because it paid well and asked for almost nothing. Someone who is, right now, in the long dark of a null they don't understand yet, walking northwest into a valley that doesn't exist. Counting doors. Looking for someone. And the someone they're looking for is me. I keep checking my hands for frostbite I don't remember getting. I keep my phone's location services on at all times now, which my friends think is paranoid, and which I tell them is about safety, and which is really about a need I can't explain to always know where I am. To never be a null, never be a blank space, never be the thing that hasn't been written down. Because I've started to notice the pressure dropping some nights. The slow, flat drop. My ears pop. I get a headache. And I tell myself it's just weather, just an ordinary low coming through, the way Renner used to tell herself it was just the generators. But last night the static came back. On nothing. On a phone with no signal. Sitting face down on my nightstand 1,000 miles from the station. Static, rising and falling, in a slow tempo like something very large breathing very slowly, a long way off. And under the static, for about 3 seconds, I heard a voice reading coordinates. It was my voice. It was calm and tired, like someone who'd been doing this for a very long time. I didn't answer it. Boss told me not to answer it, and I didn't, and I won't, because the moment you answer, you've talked to it, and it remembers the people who talk to it. But here's what I can't stop thinking about, here at the end, the thing I most need you to understand even though I can't fully understand it myself. I recognized the coordinates this time. They were mine. The ones I'm at right now. This house. This room. Something out there is reading my location into the dark. Telling something else where to find me. We are here. We are here. We are here. And I don't know if it's the thing in the storm. Or if it's me, doing the job. One last time. The way you do a thing so many times you wear the meaning out of it. Telling it where I am so it doesn't have to come looking. I don't remember starting. I don't remember choosing. There's a report in my handwriting in the drawer, and a place that doesn't exist, and both of those things are true at the same time, and I have stopped being able to tell you which one of them I live in now. The pressure is dropping again tonight. I think I'll cover the windows.